Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Honorable Deputy Chairman of Committees, we are discussing today the votes on the Ministries of Lands, Mahavali Development, Environment, as well as the Ministry of Prison Reforms, Rehabilitation and Hindu Religious Affairs. These are three important ministries, and I am pleased to have a few minutes to speak on this debate. Honorable Deputy Chairman of Committees, I believe I have Mr. Deputy Chairman of Committees. Now, with the available time, I believe I have 20 minutes of time. It's now already 12:20. I can go up to the adjournment.
20 minutes, yeah.
I can go up to the adjournment, I believe.
Yes.
Yes, thank you very much. Mr. Deputy Chairman, the state land in this country falls into two major categories. One is purely owned by the state, and the other is private owned by individuals as well as non-state individuals. Sorry. You have rung the quorum bell by mistake.
No. You speak.
Thank you. So, the Honorable Leader of the House says that you are interested in getting more people to come and listen to me. Thank you very much. So, the issue of land today has become a very contentious issue and very much interwoven with the ethnic problem of the country. From morning, we had many members of the House on both sides of the divide speaking extensively about various grievances of their constituents relating to state land and the way in which they are administered today. Now, when it comes to privately owned land by individuals or non-state institutions, we find that either they are freehold land or leasehold land, and there are other lands by inheritance, and there are illegal occupations of state land on a long-term basis, which sometimes is converted to permit land, and then permits issued when village expansion schemes and other LDO permits are given out of land kacheris. Then there are licensees, etc. Now, as a matter of fact, the state itself is the largest landowner in the country. State land is administered through a variety of legal and administrative mechanisms based in terms of law and policy. Now, we also find the privately owned land is governed by relevant public and private law. Since land is a subject matter of competing interests in the country, people are, for a variety of political and other reasons, such as demand for current and future land requirements, there are a variety of complexities that the state has got to deal with. And this has figured prominently in all our political discourses as well as peace negotiations during the several decades in the post-colonial history of this country. Land is also inextricably interwoven with the rights of the people, and certain fundamental rights recognized by the Constitution impliedly confer certain rights to citizens with regard to land. Now, research findings have revealed that the people in the Northeast have been dispossessed of thousands of acres of land. Privately owned settlement, agricultural and other land consequent to the conflict by way of either ethnic cleansing in certain areas, mass scale and planned displacement that took place during the long and arduous period of the ethnic conflict in this country. Since land is linked to livelihood, majority of the people depend on land for their sustenance. Divisions between communities on the basis of ethnicity, religion, caste, and gender reflect the broader divisions which come up during these discourses. Though the war has come to an end, the wounds, we must say, are certainly not healed, and therefore, even after 6 years of relative peace in the country, the issue of land becomes a very, very contentious issue. In this context, Mr. Deputy Chairman of Committees, promoting non-violent means to deal with disputes and conflicts and building skills and capacity of local populations will lead to trust building and opening up of new opportunities for coexistence and reconciliation, which can serve as a decisive factor in the reduction of unrest among communities within volatile environment. Now, there was this particular land circular of 2013. My honorable friend Sumandran is here in the house. He was one of those people who was at the forefront of challenging this circular, which had a serious impact on issues of land distribution, in particularly that of state land. And also it had an impact on private land, which I will come to later. And this issue, though the Supreme Court handled the issue, I must say the circular set out a certain process to be implemented in order to identify and address problems relating to state land in the northern and eastern provinces. While the circular set out the framework for issues surrounding state land, there was no indication by the government regarding plans pertaining to private land. Therefore, there had to be a parallel process.
This House cordially welcome their worship, mayor and delegate from several countries attending the 150th anniversary of the Colombo Municipality Council who are present at this movement.
Mr. Deputy Chairman of Committees, now this issue of the land circular of 2013, I was referring to that, and I believe there must be a parallel process to address problems relating to private lands as well. During the conflict, the resolution of land issues unfortunately had to be put on hold due to security concerns and numerous other difficulties. Due to this reason, detailed studies could not be carried out except for a few ad hoc enumerations covering certain areas in the northern and eastern provinces. Therefore, a credible and comprehensive database or study covering the entire issue of land and land distribution needed to be pursued. And this is something that I believe the Land Ministry must undertake as a matter of priority. Now, coming to the report of the Lessons Learned and Reconciliation Commission, this commission provided detailed observations with regard to the impact of land issues on the reconciliation process. One of the key recommendations of the commission was to amend the law of prescription in order to prevent legitimizing of forced eviction and secondary occupation of private land during the period of conflict. Mr. Deputy Chairman of Committees, when I was Minister of Justice in the last regime, I attempted to draft legislation to amend the age-old prescription law of the country in order to accommodate these concerns. Unfortunately, because of some short-sighted interventions by the then members of the government, we were unable to bring it to reality. I must congratulate the current Minister of Justice, the Honorable Vijayadasa Rajapaksa, was able to bring this once again to Cabinet 1 or 2 weeks ago. and Cabinet has now given approval, and I'm sure this will now be enacted in the next term, maybe in January, as early as possible. And that would relieve the concerns of many of those people who have been affected due to forced eviction from their lands on which they were depending for livelihood, as well as from those people who are in secondary occupation of private land in the northern and eastern provinces in particular. Now, a case in point I would like to deal with when it comes to the provisions on the prescription law. Now, we came across large number of residents of Rauff who alleged that the LTTE forced them to divest such land to individuals nominated by them at a very low price. The paddy lands that were situated deep inside some of the Tamil villages at that time, because of the purported divestiture of land, they had to virtually abandon these lands due to armed conflict, and they had subsequently had no access to these lands. These are lands along the Chenkaladi-Badulla road, on both sides of the road. There are large tracts of these lands which unfortunately have been affected, which had seriously impacted on the livelihood of those people. Now, yeah, and my honourable member Alizahir Maulana says Eraur Pattu area also similar problems are encountered. Purported land transfers have taken place during the period between years 1990 to 2006. More than 400 acres of fertile paddy land had been divested, and the LTT had sent individual letters to landowners and threatened them with death unless the lands were sold to certain identified individuals. We have those documentations available with us. When this law comes into being, we propose to have access to courts and have those grievances addressed. Several individuals who had defied the order had also been subjected to serious difficulties, and some of them were even killed. As the situation worsened, the landowners succumbed to the threats and divested the lands. And they had to give it up at varying prices much below the market rate. Sometimes the transaction value was as low as 20% of the market value at the time of the purported sale. Disposal and dispossession of paddy lands had taken place under different conditions and circumstances. There were several methods by which it happened. There were formal sale of land, where owners were forced to sign documents purported to be sale at very low prices. Then there was also informal sale of land. Owners were forced to sign blank sheets of paper. Then there were transfers through forged deeds. Lands that do not fall into above categories, some owners had been prevented from even entering and cultivating. So affected landowners allege that after the defeat of the LTT in 2009, they visited these lands to find that other individuals are in occupation. When they requested the land to be handed over to them, the occupants refused to give possession and claimed ownership. And this is why this new prescription law, when it comes into being, it would give them an opportunity to assert their legal rights over the lands from which they had been dispossessed. On an application made by affected families, the land dispute was referred even to the mediation board. There again, since the current occupants of the land had refused to appear in the mediation board, this dispute could not be resolved even through the mediation process. Then again, there is a suggestion, since the Honourable Minister of Justice is here, I must say that there was an attempt supported by several members of the international community to have special land mediation boards to be set up. Because the adversarial model in the courts sometimes would take years and years to conclude a dispute related to land. It might be a welcome exercise special land mediation boards are set up, and through that, these conflict-ridden areas, which are now returned to normalcy, this matter could be addressed. Now, another important matter, Honorable Deputy Chairman of Committees, I would refer to is the institution of the National Land Commission, which I believe is another important element which is missing ever since we had devolution in this country. Before the introduction of the 13th Amendment, land administration was centralized with Land Commissioner's Department at the top. Now, after the passage of the the 13th Amendment, land administration continued to be influenced by central authorities. Judiciary too interpreted the provisions of the Constitution relating to provincial land in favor of the central executive. With the absence of the National Land Commission, this issue is still left open. LLRC recommendations on the National Land Commission states, I quote, "The Commission is of the view that the government should expedite action on the establishment of a National Land Commission in order to propose appropriate future national land policy guidelines. In formulating land policy, the proposed National Land Commission should include guidelines for equitable distribution of state land. The Commission regrets to note that although this is a requirement under the 13th Amendment and a draft bill had been framed, successive governments, I reiterate, successive governments have failed to get it passed through Parliament. Therefore, Honourable Deputy Chairman of Committees, this is something that the present Minister of Lands should focus attention on and fulfill this long-felt need of establishing the National Land Commission. Then, coming to a few other outstanding issues, I would refer to an issue in Ampara district, the Vattamadu area land dispute. Here, a total extent of land, about 1,742 acres, which was land which was previously situated within the Akkarapat Revenue Division, now falling within the Tirukkovil DS Division. There are 600 families that are involved in the cultivation of this land. Predecessors of the current farmers had commenced cultivation in or about 1970, and in 1974, annual permits had been issued. Thereafter, permits have been issued to the farmers under the Land Development Ordinance in the years 1984-85. People continued to cultivate lands even during the height of the armed conflict. But unfortunately, in 1976, there was an attempt to declare 4,000 acres of land coming within the Akkarapat Revenue Division as pasture land, and since then, there had been a dispute between some of the local residents and these farmers. The Minister of Environment decided to allow farmers to use the land for paddy cultivation subject to certain conditions. This happened as recently as last year as well. But then there is now a case filed in the Court of Appeal by the Cooperative Society of Aliyadimbuvambu seeking orders for ejectment of farmers from the land and to prevent them from cultivating. This case is still pending, and this issue needed to be sorted out. I am sure we members of the House on both sides who are representing these areas should sit together and find a lasting solution to this burning issue of land which these 600 families have been cultivating. There are 2,800 individuals involved in this exercise, and they have been very seriously affected because of their livelihood is depending upon this cultivation. There are almost 1,000 school-going children in these families, and therefore this is a matter that we must, as a matter of urgency, should address. And since my time is limited, Honourable Deputy Chairman of Committees, I would like to refer to another one, another local issue concerning the Palliyadivatta Kirangove paddy land issue in the DS division of Lahugala. Prior to 1984, the land was in the Pothwil DS division. Here again, there is an uncertainty in determining actual boundaries between the two divisions. And therefore, these farmers who have been cultivating paddy in the land from 1978, they, since terrorist activities forced them out of the area after 85. Yes.
Already.
Yes.
So let the court decide on that.
No, let's discuss that. That's a matter that we have to.
I don't know. We can discuss it.
Of course, there are issues are involved in courts, but then court had subsequently lifted the stay order. And there were no stay order.
No, there's no stay order, but the matter is pending. But the matter is pending in court.
Yeah.
For determination.
So
sub judice,
yeah, pending the stay order. I mean, since there were no stay order, the Forest Department and the then Minister of Environment permitted the farmers to continue cultivating, and because it resulted in certain altercations, police intervened and we had to abandon farming. So we have to look at the pasture land issue.
We'll discuss it among ourselves, but since you are raising it in the House,
yes,
I thought I must mention that the matter is sub judice in any case.
That is sub judice, all right. Yes, I do understand. But then this issue, for the purpose of record, I thought I will put it into the Hansard. And then here the government agent also intervened, and several times we have had meetings with the cultivation committees of the area, but then no solution is at hand. Particularly this issue of Palliyadivatta Kerangove issue in Pothuvil area, where the government agent sent a committee to explore the situation. The former DS for Lahugala was also present during the visit. A land survey was conducted, and it was decided to distribute the land among 250 farmers from Pothuvil. Farmers were permitted to continue their cultivation, and they were told that permits would be issued in due course. There again, this issue, once again, after September 2007, the Forest Department had ordered these farmers to evacuate from this Kerangove area, as it belonged to the Lahugala division, and then there was certain protest from that area. And now the Forest Department had put landmarks few yards away from the cultivation area of the Muslims, and there again this issue is a very burning issue which affects several farmers who have been clamoring to return to these lands for cultivation. So these issues, for the record, I had included. I'm sure there are several issues pertaining to this. I would like, within the remaining 1 or 2 minutes, to quickly talk about the situation in Silavature, which is a matter of serious concern even for you, Honorable Deputy Chairman of Committee. This comes within your own district. Now, the Navy camp is virtually put up in the old town, taking over the entire town. Large extents of privately owned properties and lands have been virtually expropriated by the Navy by setting up camp there during the conflict period. Now that the conflict is over, since the LLRC itself had urged the armed forces to gradually vacate from privately owned land, it is an urgent necessity to evacuate the Navy camp from the Silavature town and take them out of the town, as well as to shift the existing police station. That too has been set up temporarily in an area where there was a health center that was set up. Now that too, sitting right in the middle of Silavature town, should be moved out of the town. And these two issues, together with variety of other issues in Trincomalee district and of course in Jaffna and Kilindry district, have got to be attended to when it comes to occupation of privately owned lands in the northern and eastern provinces. The Honourable Minister wants to say something.
Up by me.
Thank you.
And we will take necessary steps very early.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. Thank you. With those comments, Mr. Deputy Chairman of Committees, I wind up. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Order, please. Committee suspend till 1 p.m.